Tanko stood in the center of Ruga's marketplace, his chest puffed out like a rooster. His mother, Coca, approached him slowly, her old legs struggling over the uneven ground. She reached out her hand to greet him, a simple gesture mothers make. But Tanko stepped back. He looked at her wrinkled hand and curled his lip in disgust. "Don't touch me with that old hand," he said loudly. The marketplace went silent. Women stopped bargaining. Men paused mid-conversation. Children stared with wide eyes. Coca lowered her hand slowly, her face calm but her eyes holding something deep and unreadable. She said nothing. She simply turned and walked away. The villagers whispered among themselves. "Did you see that? He refused his own mother's hand. That boy has no respect." But no one confronted Tanko. He was young, strong, and feared for his sharp tongue. As Coca disappeared into the crowd, she glanced back once. Her hand, the one Tanko refused, glowed faintly in the sunlight. But no one noticed except the wind. What the villagers did not know was that Coca's hands were special. They had been blessed by her grandmother, who had been blessed by her grandmother before her. The blessing passed from mother to daughter, carried in the palms and fingers, hidden and quiet. These hands could heal the sick, bless the crops, and protect the family from harm. But the blessing only worked when given with love and received with respect. Coca had kept this secret for years, waiting for the right time to pass it to Tanko, her only son. She had raised him alone after his father died, working her fingers to the bone to feed him, clothe him, and send him to school. She had given him everything. But Tanko had grown proud. He saw her old hands as weak and useless. He did not know that those hands held the power to save him, to save the entire village. Coca sat in her small hut that night, staring at her palms. They glowed softly in the darkness, pulsing like a heartbeat. She whispered, "He is not ready. But soon, he will need me." The next morning, Tanko woke up feeling strong and confident. He went to the farm to work his land, swinging his hoe with pride. But as he struck the ground, the tool slipped from his hands and cut his foot. Blood poured out. He cursed loudly and limped home. Coca was sitting outside her hut when he passed. She stood and reached out her hand to help him. "Let me see your wound," she said gently. Tanko jerked his foot away. "I don't need your help, old woman." He hobbled past her, leaving a trail of blood in the dust. Coca watched him go, her hand still extended. She sighed and lowered it slowly. That night, Tanko's wound refused to heal. It swelled and throbbed with pain. He wrapped it in cloth, but the bleeding would not stop. He tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Outside his window, Coca sat under the moonlight, her hands glowing faintly. She whispered a prayer, and the bleeding slowed. But she did not heal him completely. He needed to learn. Word of Tanko's behavior spread through Ruga like smoke. The women shook their heads while washing clothes at the river. The men frowned while sitting under the village tree. "That boy will bring trouble to himself," one elder named Musa said. "A man who disrespects his mother disrespects the gods." The younger men agreed but said nothing to Tanko's face. He was too proud to listen. One afternoon, Elder Musa stopped Tanko on the road. "My son," he said gently, "you must respect your mother. She is the root of your tree. Without her, you will fall." Tanko laughed bitterly. "Respect? For what? For an old woman who can barely walk. I am the one who feeds her now. I am the strong one." Musa's face hardened. Strength without respect is like a river without banks. It will flood and destroy everything. Tanko waved him off and walked away. But Musa's words stayed in his mind, unwanted and heavy. That evening, as the sun set, Musa saw Coca standing near the river, her hand hovering over the water. For a brief moment, the water sparkled unnaturally. Musa's eyes widened, but he said nothing. A few weeks later, disaster struck Ruga. The rains that should have come did not fall. The sky remained clear and mocking. Farmers watched their crops turn yellow and brittle. The river, once full and rushing, began to shrink. Fish died in the shallow pools. Women walked farther each day to find water, returning with half-empty pots. The village gathered in the square, worried and confused. "What is happening to our land?" they asked. The elders held meetings and made sacrifices to the gods, but nothing changed. The drought continued. Children cried from thirst. Animals grew thin and weak. Fear crept into every home. One evening, Coca walked alone to the riverbank. She stood at the edge and placed her hand on the dry soil. She closed her eyes and whispered words no one could hear. The ground beneath her palm trembled slightly, and a single drop of water appeared. But it was not enough. The blessing could not work fully. Something was blocking it. She looked toward her son's hut and sighed. "He must come to me willingly," she whispered. "I cannot force his heart." Tanko watched the village panic with growing unease. He mocked the elders openly, saying, "You waste time with prayers and sacrifices. We just need to dig deeper wells." But as days passed and the situation worsened, even Tanko began to feel afraid. His own crops were dying faster than anyone else's. His goats refused to give milk. His chickens stopped laying eggs. One morning, he noticed something strange. While his field was completely dry, the small patch of land near his mother's hut was still green. A few plants grew there, healthy and strong. He walked closer and saw Coca kneeling in her garden, her hands pressed into the soil. Around her, birds gathered. Goats came and stood quietly. Even butterflies circled her head. Tanko's breath caught. He had never seen anything like it. For a moment, he wanted to call out to her, to ask what was happening. But pride stopped his tongue. He turned and walked away, pretending he saw nothing. That night, he could not sleep. The image of his mother surrounded by animals haunted him. Elder Musa came to Tanko's hut the next day. He did not greet him with pleasantries. He simply said, "Your disrespect is killing this village." Tanko's face twisted in anger. "What are you talking about, old man?" Musa pointed toward Coca's hut. "Your mother carries a blessing, Tanko. A blessing that could save us all. But you refuse to honor her. You refuse to even touch her hand." Tanko laughed, but it sounded hollow. A blessing. In those old, shaking hands. You've lost your mind. Musa's voice grew hard. "Mark my words, boy. Until you humble yourself and accept what your mother offers, this land will continue to suffer. And so will you." He turned and left. Tanko stood alone, his heart pounding. He wanted to dismiss the elder's words as nonsense. But deep down, fear was growing. That evening, a neighbor named Amina knocked on Coca's door. She was carrying her sick baby. "Please, Mama Coca," she begged. "My child is burning with fever. The healer has no medicine left." Coca took the baby gently and placed her hand on the child's forehead. She whispered a prayer. Within moments, the fever broke. The baby's breathing steadied. Amina wept with relief and gratitude. But she said nothing to anyone. She only watched Coca with new eyes, eyes filled with awe. The next misfortune struck Tanko hard. He woke one morning to find his entire storage hut collapsed. His tools were buried under broken wood. His stored grain was scattered and ruined. Rats had already begun to feast on it. Tanko screamed in frustration. He tried to salvage what he could, but it was useless. Everything was destroyed. Neighbors came to see the damage, shaking their heads. "This is the third disaster this month," one man said quietly. "First the wound, then the dying crops, now this." Tanko felt their stares. He felt their judgment. That afternoon, Coca appeared at the edge of his compound. She did not speak. She simply reached out her hand toward him, her face soft and patient. Tanko stared at her hand. It looked old and wrinkled, but something about it made his chest tighten. For a brief second, he almost stepped forward. But then pride rose up like a wall. "I don't need you," he muttered and turned his back. Coca lowered her hand and walked away. But that night, Tanko dreamed of his father. In the dream, his father said, "Your mother's hands built you. Do not destroy yourself by refusing them." While Tanko struggled, Coca moved quietly through the village, helping where she could. She blessed a sick goat, and it stood up the next morning. She touched a dying tree, and new leaves appeared. She prayed over a woman's infected wound, and it healed overnight. The villagers began to notice. They did not speak openly about it, but whispers spread. "Mama Coca has a gift. Her hands carry something powerful. We should ask her to help the land." But Coca remained humble. She did not boast or seek attention. She simply did what she could, one small act at a time. One evening, a group of women came to her hut. "Mama," one of them said carefully, "we have seen what your hands can do. Can you heal the river? Can you save our crops?" Coca looked at them with sad eyes. "I can try. But the blessing works strongest when my family is whole. My son must accept me first." The women looked at each other. They understood. They left quietly, their hearts heavy with knowledge they could not share. A mysterious illness began spreading through Ruga. Children fell sick with high fevers and weak bodies. The healers' medicines did nothing. Parents stayed awake all night, watching their children suffer. The village filled with the sound of weeping. Tanko's neighbor brought her child to Coca in desperation. Coca laid the child on a mat and placed both hands on the small chest. Her hands began to glow, faint but unmistakable. The child's breathing slowed, steadied, and deepened. The fever broke. The mother cried with relief. But as Coca lifted her hands, Tanko appeared in the doorway. He had been walking past and heard voices. He froze when he saw his mother's hands glowing. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Coca looked at him calmly. "Do you see now?" she asked quietly. Tanko stumbled backward and ran. He could not process what he had just seen. That night, he sat alone in his hut, shaking. The image of his mother's glowing hands burned in his mind. Fear and shame battled inside him. But still, pride would not let him go to her. The villagers could no longer deny what they were seeing. Coca's small miracles were keeping families alive. Those who came to her with respect received help. Those who did not come at all suffered. Word spread to neighboring villages. People began to call Coca the Blessed One. But she did not accept the title. "I am only a mother," she said. "Nothing more." Tanko watched from a distance as people lined up outside his mother's hut. He saw their gratitude. He saw their healed children, their restored goats, their hopeful faces. And he felt something he had never felt before. Shame. Deep, burning shame. Elder Musa approached him again. "Do you see it now, Tanko? Your mother is not weak. She is powerful. And she loves you more than you deserve." Tanko's jaw tightened. If she is so powerful, why doesn't she just heal the whole village? Musa shook his head. "Because the blessing requires love and respect to work fully. And you, our own son, give her neither." Tanko had no response. He walked away, his heart heavy and confused. Days passed. Tanko's pride and his growing fear fought a war inside him. He wanted to go to his mother. He wanted to kneel and beg for forgiveness. But every time he took a step toward her hut, something stopped him. What would people say? What would she say? What if she rejected him the way he had rejected her? One evening, he stood outside her door, his hand raised to knock. But he could not do it. He turned and walked away. Inside, Kaka sat by the fire. She knew he had been there. She had felt his presence. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "Come to me, my son," she whispered. "I am waiting." That night, Tanko barely slept. He tossed and turned, haunted by memories of his childhood. He remembered his mother's hands braiding his hair, cooking his food, wiping his tears. Those same hands he now refused to touch. Guilt crushed his chest like a stone. The river dried completely. Not a single drop of water remained. The villagers stared at the cracked riverbed in horror. Without water, they would all die. Panic spread like fire. Families began packing their belongings, preparing to leave Ruga and search for water elsewhere. The elders called an emergency meeting. Elder Musa stood and spoke loudly. "We have one hope left. Mama Kaka. We must ask her to bless the land." Everyone agreed. A group of men and women went to Kaka's hut and knelt before her. "Please, Mama," they begged. "Save us. Save our children. Save Ruga." Kaka looked at them with deep sadness. "I will try," she said. "But the blessing will not be complete unless my son accepts it. You must bring him to me." The villagers turned to Tanko, who had been standing at the back of the crowd. All eyes fell on him. He felt their stares, heavy and accusing. "Go to your mother," Elder Musa said. "Accept her hand. Save your people." Tanko's face burned with shame. But still, he could not move. That night, Tanko refused to go to his mother. He stayed in his hut, angry and afraid. "Why should I beg her?" he muttered to himself. "I am her son. She should come to me." But deep down, he knew he was wrong. He knew it with every breath. The next morning, he woke to find himself burning with fever. His body ached. His head pounded. He could not stand. Neighbors heard his groans and came to check on him. They found him lying on the floor, drenched in sweat. "He is sick," one woman said. "We must take him to Mama Kaka." But Tanko shook his head weakly. "No, not her, anyone but her." The villagers looked at each other in disbelief. Even now, in his suffering, he refused. They left him there, shaking their heads. That evening, Tanko's fever worsened. He hallucinated, seeing his father's face, hearing his mother's voice. In his delirium, he cried out, "Mama! Mama, help me!" But when he woke, he was alone. And his pride still held him captive. While Tanko suffered, Kaka continued her quiet walk. She went from hut to hut, blessing the sick, comforting the grieving, and praying over the dying land. Her hands glowed more brightly now, visible even in daylight. Children followed her, singing songs of gratitude. Women wept and kissed her feet. But Kaka remained humble. "I am only a vessel," she said. "The blessing comes from above." One afternoon, she stood in the center of the village square and placed both hands on the ground. The earth trembled. A soft green glow spread from her palms, touching the soil, the trees, the air. For a brief moment, the land responded. A single blade of grass pushed through the dry ground. A bird sang. The wind carried the scent of rain. The villagers gasped. "She can save us," they shouted. But the moment passed quickly. The glow faded. Kaka stood and sighed. "It is not enough," she said quietly. "My son must come. The blessing needs him." Tanko, watching from his window, saw everything. He saw the glow. He saw the blade of grass. He saw his mother's power. And for the first time, he felt not just shame, but awe. The villagers began to turn against Tanko. They whispered that he was the reason Ruga was dying. He is selfish, they said. He would rather let us all perish than humble himself. Children threw stones at his hut. Women refused to greet him. Men spat on the ground when he passed. Tanko felt the weight of their hatred. He became isolated, alone, and afraid. One evening, Coca came to his hut. She did not knock. She simply stood outside and called his name softly. Tanko. He opened the door slowly. His mother stood there, small and frail, her hand extended toward him. Please, my son, she said gently. Take my hand. Let me heal you. Let me heal us all. Tanko stared at her hand. It glowed faintly in the fading light. He wanted to reach out. He wanted to fall into her arms and weep. But fear and pride still gripped his heart. He stepped back and closed the door. Coca stood there for a long moment, her hand still extended. Then she lowered it and walked away, tears streaming down her face. The next day, Tanko woke to find his hut surrounded by villagers. They were not there to beg. They were there to demand. Touch your mother's hand, they shouted. Save us, or leave Ruga forever. Tanko's heart pounded. He stepped outside, his legs shaking. Elder Musa stood at the front of the crowd. This is your last chance, Tanko. Choose. Your pride or your people. Tanko looked toward his mother's hut. Coca stood in the doorway, watching him quietly. She did not speak. She did not move. She simply waited. Tanko took one step forward. Then another. His hand trembled as he reached out. The crowd held its breath. Coca extended her hand, her eyes filled with hope and love. Their fingers were inches apart. But then, a loud crack split the air. The ground shook violently. A massive tree in the center of the village split in half and crashed to the ground, barely missing a child. The villagers screamed. Chaos erupted. And in the confusion, Tanko pulled his hand back. He turned and ran. Coca watched him go, her hand still extended, glowing brighter than ever. The village was in ruins. The tree had destroyed 3 huts. The ground continued to shake. The sky turned dark, and a hot wind began to blow. The villagers believed the end had come. They gathered in the square, weeping and praying. Coca walked slowly to the center. She raised both hands high above her head. The villagers fell silent. Her hands glowed like twin suns, bright and fierce. She closed her eyes and spoke words in a language no one understood. Suddenly, the shaking stopped. The wind died. The sky began to clear. And then, from deep beneath the earth, water burst forth. A spring appeared in the center of the square, fresh and cold. The villagers shouted with joy. They ran to the water, drinking, splashing, and crying. Crops in the distance began to turn green again. The air smelled of rain. Tanko watched from the edge of the crowd, his mouth open in shock. He had never seen anything like it. His mother, the woman he had called weak and useless, had just saved the entire village. And he had done nothing. Shame crushed him to his knees. Tanko crawled through the crowd, his pride shattered, his heart broken. He reached his mother and fell at her feet. "Mama," he sobbed. "Forgive me. Please, forgive me." Coca looked down at him, her face soft but tired. She reached out her hand. Tanko took it. The moment their hands touched, light exploded between them. The glow spread from their clasped hands, covering Tanko's entire body. His fever disappeared. His wounds healed. Strength returned to his limbs. But more than that, something deeper healed. The pride, the arrogance, the coldness in his heart melted away. He wept like a child, holding his mother's hand tightly. "I am sorry, Mama. I am so sorry." Kaka pulled him close and held him. "I forgive you, my son. I always have." The villagers watched in silence, many of them wiping their own tears. In that moment, they understood something powerful. A mother's love is patient. A mother's blessing is real. And pride, no matter how strong, can be broken by humility. With Tanko's hand in hers, Kaka turned to face the village. She raised their joined hands high. Light poured from them, flooding the land. The river filled to overflowing. Rain began to fall, gentle and steady. Crops sprang up overnight. Trees bloomed. Animals returned. Sickness fled from every home. Ruga was restored. The villagers danced and sang, praising Kaka and thanking the gods. But Kaka said nothing. She simply held her son's hand and smiled. From that day forward, Tanko never left his mother's side. He cared for her, honored her, and learned the ways of the blessing so that one day, he could pass it to his own children. The village of Ruga became known far and wide as the place where mother's hand saved the nation. And the story of Tanko's refusal, and his redemption, was told for generations. Because in the end, the greatest power is not strength or pride. It is love, respect, and the willingness to humble yourself before those who gave you life. If you were Tanko, would you have touched your mother's hand sooner? Or would pride have kept you blind until it was almost too late? I want to know your opinion, because every story is like a candle that can light the path for someone else. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my folktale story from. I want to know how far it has traveled.